Here we go, talking about SSMS. I even got the friendship bracelet on. And today we're talking about an exciting update with SSMS 22.3, which gives us now Copilot instructions for our database. We're going to dig into the details of setting them up and testing out that they work on today's chapter of DataBard. DataBard, 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 DataBard. Dabba, 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 hoi, hoi, hoi. Now, to set the stage for the current state of this feature, right now, instructions in databases comes in two forms. The first form is we can add in instructions as an extended property of specific tables in the database that give instructions about how to interact with those databases. The second version is a constitution, basically an overall context to provide that says generally in this database, how should we expect to interact with it. We're going to start with the first example, which is we want to have instructions on a specific table. Here's the scenario that we set up. As you know, this environment has two specific types of models. It has an operational model here in the DBO schema, and then it has an analytical model split between fact and dim schemas. What we want to establish first is there's invoice data in both models, but when we generate analytical queries, we want to make sure we query our analytical model, not our operational model. Let's go ahead and go over to GitHub Copilot, and I'm going to paste in a prompt that I have pre-prepared. And as it runs, let's take a look. I wanted to add an instruction to the fact invoices table, so I'm specifying this specifically, that states that this table is to be used for analytical queries. But I also wanted to clarify that I'm going to be planning on doing analysis on total invoice amount, and when I do a total invoice amount assessment, I want to use a sum on this specific column that exists. This is important because there are multiple values. There's sales amount, there's a tax amount on there, there are other fields on there, and we want to use the total amount field. Alright, it gave us a response. Let's go ahead and apply this over here. Now remember, also in current state, GitHub Copilot is read only. We don't have the option to write to a database, so the best it can do is generate a query. What's the query that it generates? It's the good old add extended property, because ultimately these instructions are going to be stored in the database as an extended property. In this case, an extended property that specifically is agents.md, and then the value is the actual prompt itself, or more specifically, the context that we're going to be getting. So this is what we need for this to be successful. Now actually I'm thinking about it, and there's one thing I forgot to add into this prompt. But I'm not going to prompt Copilot again, I'm just going to go ahead and edit this. Invoices have various statuses, and when I want to get total amount from my analytical model, I only want to focus on invoices that have been successfully paid. So let's update to this to say, when identifying, let's see, use sum total amount and only sum up invoice records with a status of paid. Alright, that looks good. Let's go ahead and execute this. Now we've successfully created our extended property. We've got our instruction created, now let's test and see if it works. I'm going to go back into GitHub Copilot. I'm going to say, create an analytical query, hopefully hit that keyword, that gives me, no, version 3. Alright, we're still in 22 land, that's fine. Create an analytical query that gives us total invoice amount. Now again, ideally what it should do, it should be able to find that instruction and give us specifically what we're looking for. Alright, response, let's take a look. Here's an analytical query that returns the total invoice amount from fact invoices using only invoices with a status of paid as per the table's instructions. It specifically calls out the instructions that it found. And a quick look at this query shows that what we would expect to see. It gave us the sum like we wanted and was able to focus on just status equal to paid. Alright, testing an individual table's instructions, success. It followed it to the T. Now let's test out creating a database constitution. The call to create that extended property is fairly similar to the other one, so rather than asking Copilot to generate that, I'm going to just copy it straight from the documentation. Check out the link in this video to get to the documentation for the current state of this capability. The call is fairly straightforward. It's another extended property add call with the name constitution.md. That name is specifically important, so don't change that. And then the value, which is where we actually define our constitution. I've already added in some things into a constitution previously, so I'm going to give you some ideas of things you should think about when defining it. So here's a couple of things to think about when you're defining your constitution. First of all, as it suggests, it's .md, which means this should be markdown. So I'm going to go ahead and create my constitution in markdown format. We're going to talk about a number of things in our constitution. First of all, we're going to talk about the purpose of this database. To demonstrate the capabilities of working with a Copilot, when used in SSMS, prompt this repo will have access to database connection via an active window. Alright, it should know that already. Let's add in some actual things that we care about. Let's add in a role. So it knows that when it is giving responses, this is the general mindset it should be in. We're coming at this from the mindset of ETL development, so we want them to look at this environment as an engineer. Now here's going to be the fun part. You know, if you've seen me talk in the community, that I'm very particular about coding standards, but I also don't want to make it very complicated to create and enforce coding standards. So what we're going to test today is, can our constitution establish our coding standards? I'm going to go ahead and copy from my predefined coding standards, and we'll paste those in here as well. Typically my demonstrations are only 6 to 7. I've expanded it out to 9 standards. Looks pretty good for an initial start. Let's go ahead and execute. Command completed successfully. We've created our constitution for the database. Alright, now for the test of the constitution. And I had to shift database environments because my other environment was running into issues. But I have the same constitution in place. Here's my challenge to the Copilot. I've put in this view that clearly is not following my coding standards. I'm going to ask Copilot to check the views and see if it can find any that don't match the coding standard. So check the views in this database. Identify any views where the code within it does not match my coding standards. Ship that to 4.1. Alright, moment of truth. Let's see what we find here. Response came back and it gave us the sort of thing that we wanted. The view, internet sales, which is what we created here. Does it have violations? Yes. And it lists out the specific ones and asks if we can refactor it. Let's say, yes, give me a refactored version. And let's see if it'll clean up our code according to our coding standards. Gave us a response. And even taking a look at that initially, it's looking good. Let's go ahead and apply it. And significant changes, so we'll go ahead and we'll accept the whole thing and take a look at that. Significantly more formatted than before, and I'm pretty sure if I double check it against my coding standards, it matches them to a T here as well. There we go, a quick guide to instructions both at the table level and the database level with the current state of instructions with SSMS Copilot. Now again, I only added in new instructions. If I wanted to update them, it's the same way as updating extended properties and such in the past, so be sure to check SQL Server documentation for that information. But think of the possibilities of having instructions in your database. Anybody who connects into it, especially with Copilot capabilities, now has constraints of how your coding standards are identified as an organization. Your naming standards for the database can also be identified in that constitution. And at the table level, you can give your tables definitions of when the table should be used, for what purpose, how to maybe do summarizations or specific aggregations on that table. All could be defined there to support your query writers. This may seem like a lot of extra work for putting instructions in on these tables, but think about the future. At some point here, we're on GitHub Copilot, which means agentic capabilities are coming down the road, and this is going to be the sort of instructions that tell the agents how they should interact with the database. Now's the time to start defining those definitions and those instructions so you can set up your future agents for success when they come. Brings us to the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and as always, if you found this helpful, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ask me questions in the comments as you have them. I'll do my best to answer those questions either in the comments or in future videos. For now, I'm Data Bard, and I'll see you in the next chapter.